Alright, listen up everybody. Making music is not complicated. 90% of music is made up out of chord progressions. That's just clusters of notes placed one after the other that give you a certain emotional feeling when you go from one chord to the next. Then to compose music with those chord progressions, all you gotta do is split the individual chords into the notes that they're made of, feed those notes into different instruments, add those instruments back together, and voila, you're a composer, you're a music maker, you're a musician, you're a producer. Congratulations. Well, if it's so easy, then why isn't everyone a producer? Well, that's a good question, because it is that easy. If you know how to play an instrument, you might intuitively know how to break a chord apart into its constituent notes. However, for the most of us who are not trained musicians, we might need some tools to achieve this. And the number one tool to achieve this is the arpeggiator. What's an arpeggiator? Well, it's as simple as what I just described. It takes a chord and it outputs the notes one by one. The simplest arpeggiators in the world just turn this into this. And by the simplest arpeggiators in the world, I mean Ableton's native arpeggiator, because, spoiler alert, it's not very good. Sorry, Ableton. What we're gonna do today is we're gonna go way beyond this level of arpeggios, and we're gonna get some external help from the Reason VST. Reason, once again, thank you for sponsoring this video. It is much appreciated. My viewers will thank you when they start making wicked arpeggios like what we're gonna do in this video. In this tutorial, I'm going to use Ableton Live as my DAW and Reason as a VST that generates MIDI notes that I'm then going to feed into synthesizers. Let's get straight into it and start exploring what's possible. Let's go. Alright, before we go any further, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the little bell icon so you don't miss out on any more videos. Go to the underdog.brussels website to check out our educational resources, and consider supporting me on Patreon as well for these free weekly videos. Let's go, let's get started. Alright, let's start with the basics. Before we can do anything like arpeggios, like what I was saying, what we're going to need first is a chord progression. And first we got to make sure that there's a chord progression there that we like. So what we do is we create a MIDI track. And now we have to find chords somewhere in the world that we like. And my favorite way of getting chords that I like is to just go find a song that I like and use the chords from that song and then adjust it for my own song. And so because yesterday my flatmate had Madonna Frozen on the radio, I'm using the chords of Madonna's Frozen. It's been stuck in my head for 2 days, so it's inevitable. This is what we're gonna do. Now what we wanna do with these chords is listen to them in a simple sound design, something like Ableton's operator, which is just going to play some sine waves. And these sine waves, we're going to listen to them and we're going to notice how the notes make us feel whenever they go from one chord to the next chord. This is really important. Take your time to do this. So listen to this. Okay, so these chords, I like the feeling that they give me when they go from one chord to the next, so I'm going to use them. Now I'm going to feed these into arpeggiators. And so the simplest way to do that is inside of the MIDI channel, before these notes hit the synthesizer, to place Ableton's MIDI effect called Arpeggiator. And that's going to give you something like this. And that's all fine and well. And on Arpeggiator, you have some cool options that you can do, but you're lacking a lot of essential options. And the main thing that you're missing here is any ability to turn this thing into a rhythmical pattern. So to turn this chord progression into a rhythmical pattern, we're gonna need a more powerful arpeggiator. And in previous videos, you've seen me use Xver's Cthulhu for this, which is a very good one. But today I want to show you one of the ones that's built into Reason, just to show you the power that you get, that you unlock when you just add a few more options to an arpeggiator. Okay, how do you use an external arpeggiator in Ableton? It's not super obvious. There's a trick, and I need to show you the trick for you to know the trick, but let's do it. First, we need to create a MIDI channel. An empty MIDI channel. This is going to be called the Reason ARP. All right, and on this MIDI channel, we're going to have to put the Reason VST plugin. Simple enough, simple enough. We put the Reason VST plugin on there, and instead of putting any instrument on there, we're going to instead put in the arpeggiator, which is here under Other Devices, under Players, the Dual Arpeggio. That's the one that we're going to use. We're going to right-click it, and we're going to immediately reset device down to its basics. And interestingly enough, Reason now doesn't have any sound coming out of it, because this is just a MIDI generator. So how do you get MIDI out of a VST. Not obvious. The way to get MIDI out of a VST is to create a new MIDI track, call this the Ableton instrument. And this Ableton instrument is going to take MIDI from the Reason ARP right there. And this is the real secret. You have to go here, and instead of doing pre-effects or post-effects, you have to choose the Reason Rack plugin. Because then, when you hit in, it's going to take the MIDI from the Reason ARP. So by default, if we hit play on this MIDI sequence, we're going to just hear the ARP run over it the same way that Ableton ran over the ARP as well. It's playing these notes, but one at a time, in an upward pattern. Pretty simple, pretty stable, right? But thanks to this dual arpeggio here, we have some extra options. We have 3 ways of changing this pattern. First of all, we can change the length of the sequence to a certain amount. Let's set it to 6 steps, for instance. It'll reset every 6 steps. Cool. We can change the velocity. And the velocity, this is fundamental because you can set velocity to 0, which means no note is being played. So instead of having every note playing like this, you can set silences. And look at what that gives. Now suddenly we're getting closer to composing a melody, right? And so the next step is to get perfect control over the exact notes that are being played by turning on the pattern mode. And in pattern mode, you get access to the notes here, these 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks. They determine which note of the chord is being played. And you can combine multiples of them. So for instance, I could click here and here, and here and here, and here and here, and here and here. You can see you can determine long notes or medium or short notes, but let's hit play on this. Now suddenly we're creating rhythmical patterns. Look at this. This is something that was completely impossible with just Ableton's Arpeggiator, but suddenly we now have step-by-step control. Particularly, we're able to silence elements, and we're able to create melodies that have a shape kind of like a note plus some silence, then another note, then some silence. That's what you need to create a melody that's not just an arpeggiator line that goes da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And that's super exciting. The amount of possibilities that this unlocks is infinite. Particularly, for instance, when you take the second arpeggiator and you transpose it down an octave, and you start doing the same thing, and you create another pattern, for instance, with a different length, so it creates a polymeter versus the first pattern. Then you turn on your velocity, you make sure that it's there where you want it to be, and you create a pattern, and pretty much at random, and let's go. So these 2 patterns are now playing up against each other. Here, let me transpose this one up an octave, so you can really feel the difference. Awesome. Now, of course, we have been feeding this into just an Ableton instrument. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete this wavetable, and instead we're going to put a more interesting instrument with a more interesting sound design. What I'm going to put instead of that wavetable is the BBC Symphonic Orchestra by Spitfire Audio. I love this plugin so much because instantly you get these crazy textures. Let's go. Let's turn the play style into something like this. So what we're getting is violins playing this pattern. But let's go for trumpets. Or some marimbas. How about some flutes? See the potential that this has now? Now it's up to you to sound design interesting things over the top of this. And for instance, sometimes it can be as easy as loading up a nice plugin. Let me grab myself a silent. Let me go to one of the key patches, like maybe something like the space key. And on the ARP, what we'll do instead of programming in our own ARPs is we'll just flick through some presets. Let's have a look. Here we go. Look at this. Powerful. Wow. Oh, look at this. This is really inspiring. Here, let's turn this down. And quickly, in terms of sound design, what we'll do is we'll go into the silent and turn down the cutoff and map this velocity that's going up to the cutoff. Awesome. And then add a really big delay like the Valhalla Room. A big reverb, I mean, right? Now this is a beautiful layer to put in behind your composition. Okay, I think I've shown you what kind of a playground you've opened up with just this one tool, right? And I know some of you are like, Oscar, not all music is just made up of arpeggios. And so I want to contradict you a little bit by recreating two other legendary arpeggios that I love. And let's turn it into a game. First, I'm going to play you the chord progression. Then I'm going to add some sound design. Then I'm going to add the arpeggio. And if you recognize it before I reveal what it is, you win. All right, let's go. Okay, so here's the chord progression. I'll play it a second time. Does that ring any bells? Okay, let me add a little bit of sound design to that. See if you get any closer. Anything yet? Okay, now I'm using Reason's dual arpeggiator to feed in the arpeggio and see if you recognize it now. So that was the ARP from Moderat's A New Error, which all it is really just an ARP over a chord progression, as you could see. Okay, the next one's dedicated to my buddy Mathieu, who introduced me to this music. So love you, Mathieu. Thanks for this. Here's the chord progression. See if you can get it just from the chord progression. Let's try that again. Did you get that? No? Let me add some sound design. This is so epic. Did you catch what it was? Let me add the arpeggio and the most important sound design element that'll make it instantly recognizable if you know it. Alright, that's enough of that. That was super fun, but I hope this impressed on you the fact that chord progressions are at the heart of all music, and all you gotta do is split it up into the notes that are behind it. But for that, you need some cool tools, and Ableton's arpeggiator is maybe not good enough. You can use external arpeggiators, and the Reason one is freaking amazing, so consider grabbing that one if it suits you. The whole world of creating interesting melodies will open up because creating melodies is so much easier with a powerful arpeggiator like this. Let me know in the comments what you think of all this. Come say hi in our Discord channel, and until next time, be good to one another, stay producing, and take care. Bye bye.